English Americans, also referred to as Anglo-Americans, are Americans whose ancestry originates wholly or partly in England. According to the American Community Survey in 2010 data, Americans reporting English ancestry made up an estimated 9.0% of the total U.S. population, and form the third largest European ancestry group after German Americans and Irish Americans. However, demographers regard this as a serious undercount, as the index of inconsistency is high, and many, if not most, people from English stock have a tendency to identify as simply Americans or, if of mixed European ancestry, identify with a more recent and differentiated ethnic group. In the 1980 United States Census, over 49 million Americans claimed English ancestry, at the time around 26.34% of the total population and largest reported group which, even today, would make them the largest ethnic group in the United States. 8 out of the 10 most common surnames in the United States are of English origin or having possible mixed British Isles heritage, the other 2 being of Spanish origin. Throughout the 19th century, England was the largest investor in American land development, railroads, mining, cattle ranching, and heavy industry. Perhaps because English settlers gained easy acceptance, they founded few organizations dedicated to preserving the traditions of their homeland. Scotch-Irish Americans are descendants of Lowland Scots and Northern English settlers who colonized Ireland during the Plantation of Ulster in the 17th century. In 1982, an opinion poll organization showed respondents a card listing a number of ethnic groups and asked, thinking both of what they have contributed to this country and have gotten from this country, for each one tell me whether you think, on balance, they've been a good or a bad thing for this country. The English were the top ethnic group with 66% saying they were a good thing for the United States, followed by the Irish at 62%. The overwhelming majority of the founding fathers of the United States of America were of English extraction, including Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, John Adams, James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. English immigrants in the 19th century, as with other groups, sought economic prosperity. They began migrating in large numbers without state support. Sense of identity: Americans of English heritage are often seen, and identify, as simply American due to the many historic cultural ties between England and the U.S. and their influence on the country's population. Relative to ethnic groups of other European origins, this may be due to the early establishment of English settlements, as well as to non-English groups having emigrated in order to establish significant communities. In the succeeding years since the founding of the United States of America, English Americans have been less likely to proclaim their heritage in the face of the upsurge of cultural and ethnic pride by African Americans, Irish Americans, Scottish Americans, Italian Americans or other ethnic groups. While there may be many reasons for this, after centuries of intermarriage and internal geographic mobility, many are unable to determine a specific English origin. For these reasons, no other part of the pluralist American society is so difficult to describe as a separate entity as the English. English immigrants were and are often seen as an invisible ethnic group, due to the length of time their ancestors may have been in the United States, as the majority of the founding colonists were English people. There is little or no celebration of the English patron saint St. George's Day other than by the Boy Scouts of America. Number of English Americans. From the time of the first permanent English presence in the New World until 1900, these immigrants outnumbered all others, therefore the cultural pattern had been firmly established as the American model. 1775 estimates: according to the United States Historical Census database, the ethnic populations in the American colonies of 1775 were, 1790 census. The United States Census of 1790 was the first census conducted in the United States. It was conducted on August 2, 1790. The ancestry of the 3,929,214 population in 1790 has been estimated by various sources by sampling last names in the very first United States official census and assigning them a country of origin. The estimate results indicate that people of English ancestry made up about 47.5% of the total population or 60.9% of the European American population. Some 80.7% of the total United States population was of European heritage. Around 757,208 were of African descent, with 697,624 being slaves. Of the remaining population, more than 75% was of British origin. The states with the highest percentage of English ancestry were Massachusetts 82%, Vermont 76%, Rhode Island 71%, Virginia including West Virginia 68.5%, Connecticut 67%, Maryland Inc. D.C. 64.5%, North Carolina 66%, New Hampshire 61%, South Carolina 60.2%, Maine 60%, Delaware 60%, Kentucky and Tennessee 57.9%, Georgia 57.4%, New York 52%, New Jersey 47%, Pennsylvania 35.3%. 2000 Census, English. In the 2000 census, 24.5 million Americans reported English ancestry, 8.7% of the total U.S. population. This estimate is probably a serious undercount by over 30 million, given that, in the 1980 census, around 50 million citizens claimed to be of at least partial English ancestry. In 1980, 23,748,772 Americans claimed wholly English ancestry and another 25,849,263 claimed English along with another ethnic ancestry. In 1860, an estimated 11 million or almost 35% of the population of the United States was wholly or primarily of English ancestry. The population has increased by almost 10 times the numbers in 1860. As with any ethnicity, Americans of English descent may choose to identify themselves as just American ethnicity if their ancestry has been in the United States for many generations, or if, for the same reason, they are unaware of their lineages. English expatriates. In total, there are estimated to be around 678,000 British-born expatriates in the United States, with the majority of these being English. By American definition, there are around 540,000 English people of any race in the United States, 40,000 Asian British, 20,000 Black British people and approximately 10,000 people of a mixed background. Distribution. Following are the top 20 highest percentages of people of English ancestry, in U.S. communities with 500 or more total inhabitants: Hilldale, UT 66.9%. Colorado City, Arizona 52.7%, Manbridge, Maine 41.1%, Panguitch, Utah 40.0%, Beaver, Utah 39.8%, Enterprise, Utah 39.4%, East Machias, Maine 39.1%, Marriotts, La Turville, UT 38.2%, Wellsville, Utah 37.9%, Morgan, Utah 37.2%, Harrington, Maine 36.9%, Farmington, Utah 36.9%, Highland, Utah 36.7%, Nephi, Utah 36.4%, Fruit Heights, Utah 35.9%, Addison, Maine 35.6%, Far West, Utah 35.4%, Hooper, Utah 35.0%, Lewiston, Utah 35.0%, Plain City, Utah 34.7%. States. English Americans are found in large numbers throughout America, particularly in the Northeast, South and West. According to the 2000 U.S. Census, the 10 states with the largest populations of self-reported English Americans are: English was the highest reported European ancestry in the states of Maine, Vermont and Utah. Joint highest along with German in the Carolinas. Maps. On the left, a map showing percentages by county of Americans who declared English ancestry in the 2000 census. Dark blue and purple colors indicate a higher percentage, highest in the East and West. Center, a map showing the population of English Americans by state. On the right, a map showing the percentages of English Americans by state. History. Early settlement and colonization. English settlement in America began with Jamestown in the Virginia colony in 1607. With the permission of James I, 3 ships sailed from England and landed at Cape Henry in April, under the captainship of Christopher Newport, who had been hired by the London Company to lead expeditions to what is now America. The second successful colony was Plymouth Colony, founded in 1620 by people who later became known as the Pilgrims. Fleeing religious persecution in the East Midlands in England, they first went to Holland, but feared losing their English identity. Because of this, they chose to relocate to the New World, with their voyage being financed by English investors. In September 1620, 102 passengers set sail aboard the Mayflower, eventually settling at Plymouth Colony in November. This story has become a central theme in the United States' cultural identity. A number of English colonies were established under a system of proprietary governors, who were appointed under mercantile charters to English joint stock companies to found and run settlements. England also took over the Dutch colony of New Netherland, renaming it the Province of New York in 1664. With New Netherland, the English came to control the former New Sweden, which the Dutch had conquered from Sweden earlier. This became part of Pennsylvania. English immigration after 1776, an estimated 3.5 million English immigrated to the U.S. after 1776. English settlers provided a steady and substantial influx throughout the 19th century. The first wave of increasing English immigration began in the late 1820s and was sustained by unrest in the United Kingdom until it peaked in 1842 and declined slightly for nearly a decade. Most of these were small farmers and tenant farmers from depressed areas in rural counties in southern and western England and urban labourers who fled from the depressions and from the social and industrial changes of the late 1820s-1840s. While some English immigrants were drawn by dreams of creating model utopian societies in America, most others were attracted by the lure of new lands, textile factories, railroads, and the expansion of mining. A number of English settlers moved to the United States from Australia in the 1850s, when the California gold rush boomed. These included the so-called Sydney Ducks. During the last years of the 1860s, annual English immigration increased to over 60,000 and continued to rise to over 75,000 per year in 1872, before experiencing a decline. The final and most sustained wave of immigration began in 1879 and lasted until the Depression of 1893. During this period English annual immigration averaged more than 82,000, with peaks in 1882 and 1888 and did not drop significantly until the financial panic of 1893. The building of America's transcontinental railroads, the settlement of the Great Plains, and industrialization attracted skilled and professional emigrants from England. Also, cheaper steamship fares enabled unskilled urban workers to come to America, and unskilled and semi-skilled laborers, miners, and building trades workers made up the majority of these new English immigrants. While most settled in America, a number of skilled craftsmen remained itinerant, returning to England after a season or two of work. Groups of English immigrants came to America as missionaries for the Salvation Army and to work with the activities of the evangelical and LDS churches. The Depression of 1893 sharply decreased English emigration to the United States, and it stayed low for much of the 20th century. This decline reversed itself in the decade of World War II when over 100,000 English came from England. In this group was a large contingent of war brides who came between 1945 and 1948. In these years 4 women emigrated from England for every man. In the 1950s, English immigration increased to over 150,000 and rose to 170,000 in the 1960s. While differences developed, it is not surprising that English immigrants had little difficulty in assimilating to American life. The American resentment against the policies of the British governments rarely transferred to English settlers who came to America in the first decades of the 19th century. Throughout American history, English immigrants and their descendants have been prominent in every level of government and in every aspect of American life. 8 of the first 10 American presidents and more than that proportion of the 42 presidents, as well as the majority of sitting congressmen and congresswomen, are descended from English ancestors. The descendants of English expatriates are so numerous and so well integrated in American life that it is impossible to identify all of them. While they are the third largest ethnic nationality self-reported in the 1990 census, they retain such a pervasive representation at every level of national and state government that, on any list of American senators, Supreme Court judges, governors, or legislators, they would constitute a plurality if not an outright majority. Today it is estimated that over 80 million Americans are of English ancestry, not including African Americans, who also have some English ancestry. Political involvement, colonial period. As the earliest colonists of the United States, settlers from England and their descendants often held positions of power and made or helped make laws, often because many had been involved in government back in England. In the original 13 colonies, most laws contained elements found in the English common law system. The Founding Fathers, the lineage of most of the Founding Fathers was English. Such persons include Samuel Adams. Other signatories of the Declaration of Independence, such as Robert Morris, were English-born. Of the Committee of Five, John Adams of Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, and Roger Sherman of Connecticut had English roots. The United States Declaration of Independence was written primarily by Thomas Jefferson. Language. The English have contributed greatly to American life. Today, English is the most commonly spoken language in the U.S., where it is estimated that 2/3 of all native speakers of English live. English was inherited from English colonization, and it is spoken by the vast majority of the population. It serves as the de facto official language, the language in which government business is carried out. According to the 1990 census, 94% of the U.S. population speak only English. Adding those who speak English well, or very well brings this figure to 96%. Only 0.8% speak no English at all as compared with 3.6% in 1890. American English differs from British English in a number of ways, the most striking being in terms of pronunciation and spelling versus color, favor. Less obvious differences are present in grammar, vocabulary, and slang usage. The differences are rarely a barrier to effective communication between American English and British English speakers, but there are certainly enough differences to cause occasional misunderstandings, usually surrounding slang or region dialect differences. The two are however generally treated as mutually intelligible. Some states, like California, have amended their constitutions to make English the only official language, but in practice, this only means that official government documents must at least be in English, and does not mean that they should be exclusively available only in English. For example, the standard California Class C driver's license examination is available in 32 different languages. Expressions: in for a penny, in for a pound is an expression to mean as used in the United States which dates back to the colonial period, when a cash in the colonies was denominated in pounds, shillings and pence. Today, the 1-cent coin is commonly known as a penny. A modern alternative expression is in for a dime, in for a dollar. American cultural icons. Much of American culture also shows influences from English culture. American flag, flag of the United States, based on the British Grand Union flag, which is considered to be the first national flag of the United States, and was first flown on December 2, 1775. Cuisine. Apple pie. New England was the first region to experience large-scale English colonization in the early 17th century, beginning in 1620, and it was dominated by East Anglian Calvinists, better known as the Puritans. Baking was a particular favorite of the New Englanders and was the origin of dishes seen today as quintessentially American, such as apple pie and the oven-roasted Thanksgiving turkey. As American as apple pie is a well-known phrase used to suggest that something is all-American. Roast beef. In the middle of the 17th century a second wave of English immigrants began arriving in North America, settling mainly in the Chesapeake Bay region of Virginia and Maryland, expanding upon the Jamestown settlement. Their roast beef was often served with Yorkshire puddings and horseradish sauce. harvest festivals. Thanksgiving. In England, thanks have been given for successful harvests since pagan times. The celebrations on this day usually include singing hymns, praying, and decorating churches with baskets of fruit and food in the festival known as Harvest Festival, Harvest Home or Harvest Thanksgiving. In the U.S., it has become a national secular holiday with religious origins, but in England it remains a church festival giving thanks to God for the harvest. The first Thanksgiving was celebrated by English settlers to give thanks to God for helping the Pilgrims of Plymouth Colony survive the brutal winter. The modern Thanksgiving holiday traces its origins from a 1621 celebration at the Plymouth Plantation, where the Plymouth settlers held a harvest feast after a successful growing season. William Bradford is credited as the first to proclaim the American cultural event which is generally referred to as the first Thanksgiving. Sports. Baseball. English lawyer William Bray recorded a game of baseball on Easter Monday 1755 in Guildford, Surrey. Bray's diary was verified as authentic in September 2008. This early form of the game was apparently brought to North America by English immigrants. The first appearance of the term that exists in print was in a little pretty pocketbook in 1744, where it is called baseball. Today, rounders, which has been played in England since Tudor times, holds a similarity to baseball. Although, literary references to early forms of baseball in England predate use of the term rounders. American football can be traced to early versions of rugby football, played in England and first developed in American universities in the mid-19th century. Music. Another area of cultural influence are American patriotic songs. American national anthem takes its melody from the 18th century English song To Anacreon in Heaven, written by John Stafford Smith from England for the Anachronistic Society, a men's social club in London, and lyrics written by Francis Scott Key of English descent. This became a well-known and recognized patriotic song throughout the United States, which was officially designated as the U.S. national anthem in 1931. Before 1931, other songs served as the hymns of American officialdom. The Liberty Song, written by John Dickinson of English descent in 1768 to the music of Englishman William Boyce's Heart of Oak, is perhaps the first patriotic song written in America. The song contains the line "By uniting we stand, by dividing we fall," the first recorded use of the sentiment. My country, 'tis of thee, whose melody was indirectly derived from the British national anthem, also served as a de facto anthem before the adoption of the Star-Spangled Banner. Amazing Grace, written by English poet and clergyman John Newton, became such an icon in American culture that it has been used for a variety of secular purposes and marketing campaigns, placing it in danger of becoming a cliché copyright. Motorcycle maker, Harley-Davidson, co-founder was William S. Harley. Born to English parents, was one of the people who began the American motorcycle manufacturer. Automobile maker Ford Motor Company, founded by Henry Ford, born to an English father, William Ford. Beverages. Two of the world's most famous soft drinks were invented by Americans of English descent. Pemberton and Alderton are both English surnames. Coca-Cola was formulated at the Eagle Drug and Chemical Company, a drugstore in Columbus, Georgia, by John Pemberton, originally as a coca wine called Pemberton's French Wine Cocoa. The first sales were at Jacob's Pharmacy in Atlanta, Georgia, on May 8, 1886. It was initially sold as a patent medicine for 5 cents a glass at soda fountains, which were popular in the United States at the time due to the belief that carbonated water was good for the health. Pemberton claimed Coca-Cola cured many diseases, including morphine addiction, dyspepsia, neurasthenia, headache, and impotence. Pemberton ran the first advertisement for the beverage on May 29 of the same year in the Atlanta Journal. Dr. Pepper is a soft drink and was invented in the 1880s by pharmacist Charles Alderton in Waco, Texas, and first made in 1885. Charles Curtis Alderton was born in Brooklyn, New York, to English parents who later sent him to England to be educated. It is the oldest of the major brand soft drinks in America. English family names. Of the top 10 family names in the United States, 8 have English origins or having possible mixed British Isles heritage, the other 2 being of Spanish origin. This is the first time two surnames of non-British Isles origin have been in the top 10 most common family names. Many African Americans have their origins in slavery. Many of them came to bear the surnames of their former owners. Many freed slaves either created family names themselves or adopted the name of their former master. According to 2000 U.S. Census data, the top 10 surnames in the United States are, in the last UK census in 2001, surnames in England can be compared to the United States, with 6 of the family names in England being in both their top 10. Many English surnames are also found in Ireland. This is attributable to a number of factors, including the Protestant Plantation of Ireland, as well as the imposition of the penal laws in the Middle Ages, which forced many Irish people to anglicise their surnames. Also, in the 9th century, Viking invaders brought many Norse names to Ireland that they had already brought to England when they established and settled the Danelaw. Some Scandinavian names may have been brought to England in pre-Viking times, especially in the north and east, and the Anglo-Normans who invaded Ireland in the 1170s brought many Norman French names which had already spread to England. English place names in the United States. There are many places in the United States named after places in England as a result of the many English settlers and explorers. These include New York, New Hampshire, New Jersey after the British Crown dependency of Jersey, Manchester, Boston, Southampton, Gloucester and the region of New England. In addition, some places were named after the English royal family. The name Virginia was first applied by Queen Elizabeth I and Sir Walter Raleigh in 1584, the Carolinas were named after King Charles I and Maryland named so for his wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, and also Georgia was named after King George II. Architecture. American architecture, particularly in the nation's earlier years, has long been strongly influenced by English styles. The United States Capitol building, for example, was first designed by English-educated American architect William Thornton, and bears a resemblance to St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Also, many American college campuses, such as Harvard, Yale, Brown, Williams, Princeton University, and the University of Delaware, have English Georgian or English Gothic architecture. Law. The American legal system also has its roots in English law. For example, elements of the Magna Carta were incorporated into the United States Constitution. English law prior to the Revolution is still part of the law of the United States, and provides the basis for many American legal traditions and policies. After the Revolution, English law was again adopted by the now independent American states. Presidents of English descent. Most of the presidents of the United States have had English ancestry. The extent of English heritage varies in the presidents, with earlier presidents being predominantly of colonial English Yankee stock. Later U.S. presidents' ancestry can often be traced to ancestors from multiple nations in Europe, including England. George Washington, first president 1789–97, John Adams, second president 1797–1801, Thomas Jefferson, third president 1801–1809, James Madison, fourth president 1809–17, John Quincy Adams, sixth president 1825–29, William Henry Harrison, ninth president 1841–1841, John Tyler, 10th president 1841–1845, Zachary Taylor, 12th president 1849–50, Millard Fillmore, 13th president 1850–. 1853, Franklin Pierce, 14th president 1853–1857, Abraham Lincoln, 16th president 1861–65, Andrew Johnson, 17th president 1865–1869, Ulysses S. Grant, 18th president, 1869–77, Rutherford B. Hayes, 19th president 1877–1881, James A. Garfield, 20th president 1881–81, Chester A. Arthur, 21st president 1881–85, Grover Cleveland, 22nd and 24th president, 1885 Euro 89 and 1893 Euro 97, Benjamin Harrison, 23rd President, 1889 93, William McKinley, 25th President, 1897 1901, Theodore Roosevelt, 26th President, 1901 09, William Howard Taft, 27th President 1909 13, Warren G. Harding, 29th President 1921 23, Calvin Coolidge, 30th President 1923 1929, Franklin D. Roosevelt, 32nd President 1933 45, Harry S. Truman, 33rd President 1945 53, Lyndon B. Johnson, 36th President 1963 69, Richard Nixon, 37th President, 1969 74, Gerald Ford, 38th President 1974 77, Jimmy Carter, 39th President 1977 81, Ronald Reagan. 40th President 1981 89, he was the great-grandson, on his father's side, of Irish migrants from County Tipperary who came to America via Canada and England in the 1840s. His mother was of Scottish and English ancestry. George H. W. Bush, 41st President 1989 93, County Wexford historians have found that one of his ancestors, Richard de Clare, Earl of Pembroke nicknamed Strongbow, offered his military services in the 12th century Norman invasion of Wexford, Ireland. Strongbow married Eorth, daughter of Dermot MacMurrough, the Gaelic king of Leinster who had welcomed the Norman assistance to regain his throne in Ireland. Bill Clinton, 42nd President 1993 2001, George W. Bush, 43rd President 2001 2009, Reynold Bush from Messing, Essex, England, emigrated in 1631 to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Barack Obama, 44th President 2009, his maternal ancestors came to America from France, England, Germany, Switzerland and Ireland. His ancestors lived in New England and the South, and by the 1800s most were in the Midwest. His father was Leo from Kenya, and was the first person in his family to travel or live outside of Africa. Other notable English Americans. See also: Americans or American people, Anglo-America, English, Anglo-American relations, Anglo-Celtic Australian, Anglosphere, Boston Brahmin, British American, demographic history of the United States, English colonial empire, English place names in the United States, Scotch-Irish American, European American, immigration to the United States, list of English Americans, Scottish American, Welsh American, maps of American ancestries, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, Yankee, references.